The hum of my car's engine was the only sound breaking the eerie silence of the night. I'd been driving for hours, the endless stretch of highway before me illuminated only by my headlights and the occasional flicker of stars peeking through the clouds. It was supposed to be a simple road trip, a chance to clear my head after a tough breakup. But as the clock on my dashboard ticked past 2 a.m., I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The road ahead seemed to twist and turn more than I remembered from my last trip through these parts. The trees on either side of the highway loomed larger, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers trying to grasp at my car. I blinked hard, trying to focus. Maybe I was just tired. That's when I saw it. A figure standing motionless on the side of the road, barely visible in the gloom. As I approached, I could make out more details: a woman in a tattered white dress, her long dark hair obscuring her face. My heart raced as I debated whether to stop. Before I could decide, she raised her head and locked eyes with me through the windshield. Her face was a mask of terror, eyes wide and mouth open in a silent scream. I jerked the wheel instinctively, swerving to avoid her. When I looked in my rearview mirror, she was gone. "What the hell?" I muttered, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. It must have been a trick of the light, my tired mind playing tricks on me. I flipped on the radio, desperate for some noise to break the oppressive silence. Static crackled through the speakers, punctuated by snippets of distorted voices. I could almost make out words, but they slipped away before I could grasp their meaning. As I fiddled with the dial, movement caught my eye. There, in the back seat, a pale hand reached towards me. I screamed, slamming on the brakes and sending the car into a skid. When I finally regained control, I whipped around to look behind me. The back seat was empty. My breath came in ragged gasps as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Was I losing my mind? I fumbled for my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone. No signal. With shaking hands, I put the car back in drive and eased onto the road. I had to find a town, a gas station, anything. I couldn't be alone out here anymore. The miles crept by, each one feeling longer than the last. The landscape outside my window seemed to shift and change, familiar landmarks disappearing and reappearing in impossible places. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but my eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that ghostly woman or some other horror. A flash of light in the distance caught my attention. Hope surged through me. It had to be a town or at least some sign of civilization. I pressed down on the accelerator, eager to reach safety. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't the welcoming lights of a town, but a single porch light illuminating a dilapidated old house set back from the road. I slowed, torn between the desire for human contact and the growing dread in the pit of my stomach. The decision was made for me when my engine sputtered and died, the car coasting to a stop right in front of the old house. I turned the key, but nothing happened. Not even a click. No, I muttered, panic rising in my throat. I had no choice. I'd have to see if anyone was home and could help. I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching under my feet sounding impossibly loud in the stillness of the night. As I approached the house, I could hear the faint sound of music drifting from inside. It sounded old, like something from the 1920s played on a scratchy record. My hand trembled as I reached for the door knocker. Before I could grasp it, the door swung open with a long, ominous creak. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, her face lined with age and her eyes cloudy with cataracts. She smiled, revealing a mouth full of blackened teeth. "We've been waiting for you, dearie," she said, her voice raspy and dry. Come in, come in. You must be tired after your long drive." Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The old woman reached out, her bony fingers wrapping around my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't be shy now," she said, pulling me inside. "The others are so eager to meet you." As I stumbled across the threshold, I caught glimpses of shadowy figures moving at the edges of my vision. The music grew louder, the scratchy melody underlaid with whispers I couldn't quite make out. "What others?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "What is this place?" The old woman's grip tightened, her nails digging into my skin. "Why, it's a gathering place for lost souls, of course. Those who wander the night roads, never to find their way home again." My blood ran cold as her words sank in. I turned to flee, but the door had vanished, replaced by a solid wall. The room seemed to stretch and distort around me, filled with the swaying forms of ghostly figures. "Welcome home," the old woman cackled, her features melting and shifting into something inhuman. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The shadows closed in around me, and I knew with terrifying certainty that my journey was far from over. As the world faded to black, I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of my car's engine roaring to life outside, carrying some new unfortunate soul down the endless night road. I awoke with a start, my head pounding and my vision blurry. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came rushing back: the endless night drive, the ghostly woman on the road, the house with its sinister inhabitants. I bolted upright, expecting to find myself surrounded by those ethereal figures, but instead, I was alone in my car. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a pale glow across the landscape. I was parked on the side of the highway, with no sign of the house or anything else I'd experienced during the night. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion? I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the lingering dread that clung to me like a shroud. That's when I noticed a series of deep scratches on my wrist, right where the old woman had grabbed me. My blood ran cold as I traced the marks with trembling fingers. It hadn't been a dream. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone. To my relief, I had a signal now. I dialed my best friend, Sarah, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what had happened. "Slow down," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Where are you now?" I looked around, trying to spot a road sign or landmark. I am not sure. Somewhere on Highway 16, I think. "Sarah, I'm scared. Something's really wrong here." "Okay, just stay put. I'm going to call the police and have them track your phone. Don't move, all right?" I agreed, ending the call with a promise to stay in touch. As I waited, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The trees lining the highway seemed to loom closer, their branches swaying despite the lack of wind. A flicker of movement caught my eye. There, in the rearview mirror, I saw a face not my own, but the ghostly visage of the woman I'd seen on the roadside. Her eyes were black pits, her mouth stretched in a silent scream. I whirled around, but the back seat was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, my own pale, terrified face stared back at me. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky. But instead of bringing comfort, the daylight only seemed to make things worse. Shadows moved in impossible ways, and more than once I caught glimpses of figures darting between the trees. When a police cruiser finally pulled up behind me, I nearly wept with relief. The officer approached cautiously, one hand on his holster. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, peering into my car. I nodded, my voice hoarse as I explained about breaking down and waiting for help. I couldn't bring myself to mention the other things I'd seen. He'd think I was crazy. The officer radioed for a tow truck and offered to stay with me until it arrived. As we waited, he asked me a few questions about my trip, where I'd come from, where I was headed. "You're lucky," he said, his expression grave. "We've had a lot of strange occurrences on this stretch of road. Disappearances, accidents, people seeing things they can't explain." A chill ran down my spine. "What kind of things?" He hesitated, as if debating whether to continue. "Ghosts, some say. Or something worse. There are old stories about this land, going back centuries. They say it's a thin place, where the veil between worlds is weak." Before I could ask more, the tow truck arrived. As they hitched up my car, the officer pulled me aside. "Listen," he said, his voice low. "Whatever you do, don't stop driving until you're well clear of this area. No matter what you see or hear. Understand?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As I climbed into the tow truck's cab, I could have sworn I saw something move in the trees behind the officer, a pale figure in a tattered white dress. The driver was silent as we pulled away, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. I watched the police cruiser disappear in the side mirror, an inexplicable sense of dread washing over me. "First time on this road?" the driver asked suddenly, his voice gruff. "Why, yeah," I stammered. "Is it always this strange out here?" He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Strange is one word for it. This road has a way of getting under your skin, showing you things you don't want to see." I wanted to ask him more, but something in his tone made me hold back. We drove in silence for what felt like hours, the landscape outside unchanging. I began to wonder if we were even moving at all, or if we were caught in some kind of loop. Just as I was about to say something, the truck shuddered to a halt. The driver cursed, fumbling with the ignition. "What's wrong?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "Don't rightly know," he muttered. "Stay here, I'm gonna take a look." He climbed out, leaving me alone in the cab. I watched him pop the hood, disappearing behind it. Minutes ticked by, and he didn't reappear. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and frightened. "Is everything okay?" No response. Against my better judgment, I opened the door and stepped out. The hood was still up, but there was no sign of the driver. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. My voice echoed back at me, distorted and wrong. That's when I noticed the silence. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind through the trees. It was as if the world had been muted. I turned in a slow circle, my heart pounding in my chest. The road stretched out endlessly in both directions, but something was off. The lines on the pavement seemed to shift and move, like writhing snakes. A whisper reached my ears, so faint I almost missed it. "Join us," it said, the words carried on a non-existent breeze. "Stay with us forever." I backed away from the truck, my feet moving of their own accord. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices begging, pleading, demanding. That's when I saw them. Figures emerging from the trees, their forms flickering like bad television reception. I recognized the woman in the white dress, her face now a mask of sorrow. Behind her came others, men, women, children, all with the same hollow eyes and reaching hands. No, I whispered, shaking my head. This isn't real. It can't be real. But I could feel them, their cold fingers brushing against my skin as they drew closer. The world around me began to warp and twist, reality peeling away to reveal something darker underneath. In that moment, I understood. This road, this place, it wasn't just haunted. It was hungry. And I was its next meal. I ran. I ran like I'd never run before, my lungs burning and my legs aching. The voices followed, rising to a fevered pitch. The road beneath my feet turned to quicksand, trying to pull me down. I don't know how long I ran, or how far. Time seemed to lose all meaning. But suddenly, I burst through an invisible barrier, and the world snapped back into focus. I found myself standing on the side of the highway, cars whizzing past as if nothing had happened. My own car was there, parked neatly on the shoulder, looking perfectly normal. Shaking, I climbed inside and turned the key. The engine roared to life without hesitation. As I pulled onto the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I saw them, a crowd of faces, watching me with hollow eyes. Then they were gone, and I was alone. I drove for hours, not daring to stop until I was hundreds of miles away. Even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. That a piece of that hungry road had latched onto my soul. Now, as I sit here writing this, I can't help but wonder, did I really escape? Or am I still there, trapped in some twisted version of reality, believing I got away? All I know is this: if you find yourself driving down a lonely highway in the dead of night, and things start to seem off, don't stop. Don't look back. Just drive, and pray that whatever's out there doesn't catch up to you. Because once the road gets a taste of you, it never lets go completely. And somewhere out there, in the spaces between heartbeats and the shadows between stars, it's waiting. Waiting for you to take that one wrong turn, to let your guard down for just a moment. And when you do, it'll be there, ready to welcome you home.